So I'm going to be talking about the basic economic problem and opportunity cost as my main unit. Standard I went with is IGCSE Economics 0455. Um, didn't want to go with anything Common Core. That's very basic, like we just discussed in the class. And I didn't go with IB framework because IB is a little later on in the school that I will probably be doing my practicum at. So they do PYP, IGCSE followed by DP. Um, and so in IGCSE, it is pretty prescriptive course. They do have to sit an exam for economics in grade 10, and it's pretty predefined compared to the rest of the IB framework, which is a lot more fluid. It's a lot about assessing, continuously assessing your students and adapting the coursework. Whereas with IGCSE, it's pretty firm. So some of the big ideas I want to hit with this unit is that choice between A and B has a cost. Second thing is the cost is typically a major influencer in decisions. So that cost could be monetary, it could be emotional. There's many different ways that cost can be. And what I want them to do in terms of a 21st century skill is to critically think and analyze this stuff. So the main skills I'm going to have them use is understanding. So I want them to make relationships, provide a why. I want them to analyze. I want them to look at examining the details and showing the different meaning to those things. And then the other main one I want to do is describe. I want them to state the point of a topic and then give some features on that. So in order to do all that, I need them to do three main activities. So the first activity is a limited resource choice and scarcity activity. And actually all three of these are based on Common Core math, reasoning quantitatively, and solving problems. So the choice and scarcity is about introducing basic economic theory. They're going to read an article about the US government and then be given the task of taking over the US budget. They spend it on 5 or 6 different items, and then there's a scenario that tells them we need to make some cuts here, the population wants this and that, etc. And they got to work as a group to come out with that. So they role play the government. They have new priorities. What do you do with a budget neutral? You cannot increase the budget. So they'll come up with a short presentation, and while they're doing that, I'm going to be able to assess them throughout, check for understanding, and then when they do the actual presentation, I'll be able to confirm if they've actually understood the material or not, and the choices that they're making. If I need to extend this activity for any of the groups that are doing really well, what I'll do is I'll ask them to present a few additional concepts and look at that. So what I'd probably do is ask them to identify some key products or services that the government offers that are either really abundant or that are really rare in the U.S. economy, and then ask them what the difference in that actually is. Second activity I'd like to do is alternative choices. It's based on an article called How Much Do You Spend on Prom? So you'll ask them to look at that article, think about the trade-offs. There is a pro and con about somebody spending a lot less versus somebody who spends a lot of money on a dress and etc. So in that class discussion, I'm going to be able to see if they understand what it means to have a trade-off, what it means to spend less on these things. And for the main activity in that is to get people in a small group. I'll give them a business, and then in that business, they will take their understanding of trade-offs and opportunity cost, and they'll analyze this business and come up with some decisions. So that is also another chance for me to go group to group to group to do that. If I have another group that's doing really well, I'm going to give them the additional task to look at alternatives, name the kind of decisions that the companies need to do to make those alternatives, and are these some alternatives that the companies would actually want to do. Lastly, what I'd look at is, in terms of an activity, it's called Red Velvet Revolution. It's based on an entrepreneur who started a big thing about cupcakes. So I'd give them a store location to work with. They'd have to brainstorm the type of customers that would come by in the store, and then identify the alternatives to their own place. So is there a Tim Hortons, McDonald's, Starbucks, etc. around their place? And then they'll have to think that through, like, if we do have an alternative, could the customer go somewhere else? Yes. And from that, they need to then understand how the customer thinks and then create an advertisement. So they'll work as a group, they'll come up with ideas, they'll brainstorm and be creative, and then they'll present their ad. And then again, I'll have those opportunities throughout that specific activity to go to the different groups and then assess for understanding, and then check finally at the presentation if they got it or not. Then at the end of the module, I'd have a quiz based on the 3 different activities, checking for understanding based on what they've presented to me. So for example, in the Red Velvet, do they understand what the customer's choices are? They have the choice between Tim Hortons, McDonald's, Starbucks, Red Velvet. Could they go to any one of these places, and why? So those are the ways I'd have the formative assessments throughout, specifically in the group work and in the presentations, and then have a summative assessment at the end of the unit. That way it can cover everybody. One thing I want to touch on too is for the groups, I would specifically like to have them in like same peer level. That way, if I have strong groups, I can give them those extra extension to the activities. And for the groups that are struggling, I'll be able to specifically work with them, get them to better understand the different activities that we're doing, the readings that we're doing, and then that way everybody will be able to move along at the same level.